Okie doke. Fourth and final video of the introductory lectures. And in this one, I'm just going to be setting the scene a bit for the actual content of the course. Okay. And it's called the choice set and choices. Okay. So we're going to start way back. And last year, the last 2 or 3 years, I've actually spent a couple of lectures on this stuff, but super interesting, but it just got too much. Okay, last year, especially, some of you have probably heard, it all got a bit much. So I've taken it out of the course again. But I am going to say like 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. Human evolution going way back. Okay. So Homo, the genus Homo, appeared round about 2 million years ago. Humans, if you like. Homo sapiens, that's like our species, appeared roughly 300,000 years ago in Africa, as you all know. But around about 70,000 years ago, very roughly, something seemed to happen with our species. Maybe it's whether it was a result of cultural evolution or whether there was a tweak in the way our brains worked. But it seemed that suddenly we started on a path of technological and cultural change. Okay. Around about 70,000 years ago. So what happened? Well, let's think about blue tits on milk bottles instead of humans for a little while. So this is a picture of a blue tit nicking the cream from the bottle, a milk bottle on the doorstep of an English house in the 1900s, during the 20th century. So in the early 20th century, blue tits discovered that they could pick their way through the thin aluminium tops of milk bottles and nick the cream. Okay. And that gave them an extra source of food. And the amazing thing was they could teach this to each other. They sort of observed each other and like, come along, look what I found, you know. And so across the country, after the initial discovery somewhere, no one knows where, but roughly I think it's known where, it spread across the whole of the UK. What did they do with this newfound source of food? What changes do they make to their lifestyle? Did they boost their reproductive success? Have more? Did they have like bigger broods, more offspring? Did they just sort of eat more and get fat? Or did they just sort of chill out more? Did they sort of eat the cream and then not bother hunting for insects or whatever blue tits hunt for otherwise? And they sort of hang out in the local tree chatting to their friends instead because they were already full. Well, what the theory of evolution tells us is whatever choice they made, it would be ultimately with the sort of aim of boosting their reproductive success, because that is what living organisms have evolved to do. Their genes and so on are set up so that they make choices that lead to them having more surviving offspring. Okay. And this discovery of the milk is a form of technological progress for the blue tits, right? But it was a bit of a one-off for them. They didn't then make loads of new discoveries and get more and more power. Okay. We humans, we discovered, oh, if we break through the Earth's crust in certain places and stick a pipe down there, oil comes out. Okay. That was also useful for us. That was technological progress. The difference with us is that we made and are still making an effectively infinite number of such discoveries, allowing us to get more consumption, more inputs out of our surroundings, out of the environment, to increase our degree of control over our environment. What do we do with the power that this technological progress, these discoveries give us? Okay, do we have more kids? Do we consume more? Do we chill out more? And unlike the blue tits, we can actually think about this and weigh up the options. And we're no longer driven by this sort of evolutionary imperatives. Of course, that's still with us, but we also have, to a much greater extent, a choice. We can reason and think about what we want to do. So what do we do? Well, up until about 300 years ago, we basically had more kids. Okay, we just went straight for the reproductive success. When we got new technologies that allowed us to get more out of our environment, more of our kids survived, we lived for longer, the population grew, and our consumption fell back. Okay, per person, total consumption goes up, but per person it falls back because we're on a fixed area of land. Okay, if we discover a boat, we might be able to get to a new continent or a new island. But then soon, when we get to that island, wow, it's great. There's loads of huge animals. We kill those off in no time. We feast on them. Before long, we've got a big population of humans. The big animals are all dead, and we're back scratching a living. Okay, this is Malthus. Okay, that's what we did in the past. These are Moa, one example. When we showed up in New Zealand, which is only 800 years ago, we wiped out all the Moa within about 100 years. There was huge flightless birds, about 20 species of them, I think, hundreds of thousands of them. Some of them were absolutely huge, others not so big. We wiped them all out in no time. Okay, this is what we do, or what we used to do anyway, when we show up in new places. Okay. In the first, between 70,000 and 10,000 years ago, we didn't do agriculture. We just foraged, hunting and gathering. Okay, there's very slow technological progress, huge effects on other species. We wiped out Moa. We also wiped out other human species like Neanderthals and a bunch of other ones. Then we discovered agriculture about 10,000-ish years ago. We started collecting. That allowed us to live closer together, build cities, and so on, which set off the whole more sophisticated societies with more research, more thinking about better ways of doing things, new ways of doing things, faster technological progress, still huge effects on other species. Some of them were favored, like the ones we cultivated. Others were wiped out, like the aurochs, who were the forerunners to modern cows. And throughout this period, everything, as soon as we discovered something that allowed us to get more out of the environment, allowed more of us to survive, and our per capita consumption drops back. The typical person throughout the whole period is scratching out a living. As you know, the Swedes among you, well, my ancestors don't come from Sweden, but we were basically until about 100 years ago, more or less everyone in Sweden was just about scratching a living out of the land. Okay, so this is Malthus. But this phase is over in almost all countries in the world, actually. Why? How come it's over? What ended the Malthusian phase? Well, what ended it is demographic transition, right? That we started to take control of our birth rate. The Malthusian argument is that the birth rate is just sort of exogenous and the death rate is affected by income. So when our income per capita goes up, the death rate goes down, births exceed deaths, population goes up, which pushes income down again. But now, these days, we have control over both the birth rate and the death rate. And it's not just about contraception, it's about making conscious choices, whether through contraception or other ways, because this all started, the demographic transition started way before contraception was widespread. We start making conscious decisions to actually not have so many kids, and that allows our per capita incomes to grow sustainably, or at least in the medium run. Okay. So that is the modern era, which started around about 300 years ago, or kicked off around about 300 years ago in the UK or in England, has spread since then. So, and this is the consumerist phase, right? We're getting richer and healthier, we're reducing our fertility, we're having more fun, but we're trashing the planet. Are we getting richer and healthier? Definitely, yeah. Have a look at Hans Rosling's video. For an example, if you want something more neutral, you could have a look at Jeffrey Sachs's book. Okay. We're getting hugely richer and hugely healthier. Oh, I already talked about that. Don't know what that's doing there. Are we reducing our fertility? Yes. The trend in fertility is down to 2 children per female or less in more and more countries. Almost all the rich countries in the world is below 2 per female, which is consistent with long-run decline in population in the long run. Some countries still have birth rates well above 2 per female, but declining mostly steeply. Okay, so population is going to level off or probably start declining. Are we having more fun? Well, we're definitely increasing our leisure time, okay? In the rich countries or in the growing economies, as productivity goes up, we choose to consume more, but we also choose to take more leisure time. Okay, we work less and less over time, although, and we'll come to this at the end of the course, that is leveling off. The last 20, 30 years in the richest countries, that has leveled off. And you might think, well, does any of this lead to more happiness? Well, it turns out, according to the evidence we can find, it does seem to. We are happier in the rich countries than we were before, and happier in the rich countries than people are in the poorer countries. That's the best data we can find. Are we trashing the planet? Well, clearly, according to some measures, we are, right? Climate change, we're triggering climate change, we're acidifying the oceans, we're causing massive species loss, and potentially within decades, there could be very large-scale extinctions, for instance. Okay. We're extracting exponentially more non-renewable natural resources. And as you know, an exponential increase in resource extraction, it can't go on forever, right? We'd be digging up the whole planet. On this data, within about 700 years, we'd be digging up the whole of the Earth's crust every year. So clearly that is not sustainable. Debatable whether that counts as trashing the planet, but it's definitely, we can't carry on with the trends of the last 100 years. Those trends are not sustainable. Okay, that is clear. We're abusing other species to a quite unbelievable extent. This picture is just an illustration of. We're also emitting huge quantities of pollutants. But there is also a good picture, because what we see in those pictures is we have a log scale, which means that a straight line is exponential growth. And we basically have exponential growth in GDP going on in these pictures. And then in polluting emissions, we have initially polluting emissions actually grow even faster than the growth rate. but then they seem to nosedive. Okay, but in specific cases. Are these cases the exception or are they the rule? Will we see similar declines for other pollutants over time, like carbon dioxide? Okay, time will tell. Yeah, here we have carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is still here, right? It's still growing faster than GDP, or actually about the same rate as global GDP, carbon dioxide emissions. But maybe we're about to switch to renewable technologies and ditch fossils, and maybe we'll see a steep decline. And that's really what this course is about. Okay, how to explain the kind of things I've just been telling you about, not the population, but the natural resource use, pollution emissions. How to explain the data and how do we manage the future to get the outcomes we want. Okay, and I think that's the last slide. Yeah. So that's the end of the first intro set of lectures. The next set, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, starting off by understanding the growth process.